Emeraldella is of uncertain phylogenetic affinity due to the paucity of specimens. The inner branches of the biramous limbs were likely used for walking on the sea floor, especially the middle 8 or 9 limbs, which were longer than the posterior limbs. The animal might have been capable of short bursts of swimming, using its broad outer limb branches to propel itself through the water using a wave-like motion. The most complete specimen of Helmetia is 19 cm long, and has 6 thoracic segments. There is a head shield and a large tail shield, making the animal leaf-shaped. Unlike trilobites, the margin of the head shield is concave, ending in a spine on each corner. There is an oval structure with 2 spots at the anterior center of the head shield, behind which are 2 eyes. The whole animal is broad and flat with a thin exoskeleton. This exceptionally rare arthropod is known as Sapirion. The species is known from very few compressed examples with little to no relief. The taxon is similar to Quamaya and Scioldia, but readily distinguished from them by the lack of marginal spines and a more elongated body outline. Sydnea is thought to have been a benthic carnivore and scavenger that walked along the sea floor in search of hard-shelled prey. Gut contents have revealed that it fed largely on small trilobites, as well as on brachiopods and small arthropods. The gut was narrow, but widens posteriorly to form a pocket where digestion presumably took place. The retention of feces likely indicates infrequent feeding. As with most early trilobites, Pichella has an almost flat exoskeleton that is only thinly calcified. It also shares crescent-shaped eye ridges, but these rise above the exoskeleton. This trilobite can easily be distinguished from other trilobites by its club-like genal spines. They were probably marine bottom dwellers. Trilobites form one of the earliest known groups of arthropods. The first appearance of trilobites in the fossil record defines the base of the Atdabanian stage of the early Cambrian period, and they flourished throughout the lower Paleozoic before slipping into a long decline, when, during the Devonian, all trilobite orders except the Proetida died out. They were mostly fairly standard-looking trilobites with flattened bodies, although some had long spines or unusually large numbers of segments. But Kleptothule was one of the otter-looking Redlichides, found in the Sirius Posset fossil deposits in Greenland. About 3 centimeters long, it had an elongated and relatively thin many-segmented body and a pointy head, giving it an almost snake-like appearance. By the time trilobites first appeared in the fossil record, they were already highly diversified and geographically dispersed. Because trilobites had wide diversity and an easily fossilized exoskeleton, they left an extensive fossil record. The study of their fossils has facilitated important contributions to biostratigraphy, paleontology, evolutionary biology, and plate tectonics. Trilobites are often placed within the arthropod subphylum Schizoramia within the superclass Arachnomorpha, although several alternative taxonomies are found in the literature. More recently they have been placed within the Artiopoda, which includes many organisms that are morphologically similar to trilobites, but are largely unmineralized. Like in many early trilobites, the thorax of paradoxides consists of so-called non-fulcrate segments that allow the animal to roll, providing protection from front, rear, top, and bottom, while leaving access to the soft ventral side of the animal from each of the sides. Complete specimens of paradoxides have been found with the Labrygony and fused rostral hypostomal plate. In molting, the body was arched above the substrate, with the anterior border at the front and posterior pleural spines dug into sediment. Like all Agnostida, Agnostida has only two thorax segments. It has a round cephalon without spines. The cephalic border is narrow, while the border furrow is wide. The lateral furrows of posterior lobe of glabella can be seen as sets of pits or a narrow straight or slightly curved backward furrow. It carries a node at or slightly behind the center of the rear lobe. Due to the existence of an excellently preserved deposit in the Frankfurt Shale in New York State, that suggests an entire population of Triarthris was killed and quickly buried, it has been possible to make a plausible reconstruction of its life history. After hatching from roughly spherical eggs, the small protaspid and early meraspid stages supposedly lived between the plankton in the water column. This is derived from the fact that only exuvii of the early stages were found, making clear that they haven't died in the disaster that killed their elders. Up to around 5 centimeters long, Ilrathia is known from massive numbers of specimens. It had a wide thorax and short spines on the cheeks of its head shield, and seems to have been unusually tolerant of low oxygen conditions on the seafloor. It was one of the earliest known animals to exploit such an environment, avoiding predators and competition, and it probably either grazed on sulfur-oxidizing bacteria or had evolved a symbiosis with them similar to modern giant tube worms. Ptychoparids are in dire need of a full revision. Since they were the ancestors of many other major groups, they're still crucial for understanding early trilobite evolution. There may be a salvageable single lineage somewhere in the remains of this wastebasket, even if it's restricted to just close relatives of the genus Ptychoparia, but until somebody tackles them properly, they're stuck in taxonomic limbo with their name only being used in a loose sense. Asaphida is a large, morphologically diverse order of trilobites found in marine strata dated from the Middle Cambrian until their extinction during the Silurian. They generally have cephalon and pygidium parts similar in size, and most species have a prominent median ventral suture. Heads are often flat, and carapace furrows in the head area are often faint or not visible. Symphysops has features typically associated with a pelagic lifestyle, among which very large eyes, compact thorax, and indications of strong musculature. In some later cyclopygids, progressive enlargement resulted in the anterior fusion of their eyes. Given the weight of the dorsal exoskeleton, it is likely cyclopygids swam upside down, not unlike some extant crustaceans with pelagic lifestyles. Fossils of the trilobite Ampex priscus, dating back about 480 million years ago, have been recently described as clustered in lines along the ocean floor. The animals were all mature adults, and were all facing the same direction as though they had formed a conga line or a peloton. It has been suggested they line up in this manner to migrate, much as spiny lobsters migrate in single-file queues. One species, Isotolus rex, is currently the world's largest trilobite ever found as a complete fossil, and was probably exceeded in size only by Hungioides bohemicus, in which the specimens probably exceeding Isotolus rex in size are only known from partial remains. In the Ordovician period, an inland sea formed in what is now Eastern Europe. The sea contained a remarkably diverse trilobite fauna. Over a dozen species of Asaphis developed in this sea, with many species, including unrelated species, developing long eye stalks in various lengths. That so many species of trilobite developed eye stalks suggests that they were trying to overcome increased turbidity, or there was some sort of massive selective pressure leading these trilobites to bury themselves in the substrate up to their eyes. This species may have lain in wait buried in a benthic layer of loose debris or sediment with only its periscope eye stalks protruding above, looking out for danger or prey. Harpetid trilobites are characterized among trilobites by bearing a comparatively large, semicircular brim around the cephalon, which is often perforated by small pores. This brim is thought to serve as a filter feeding apparatus. The brim stretches backward on either side of the cephalon and typically has a pronounced suture along the outside. Unlike the trilobites of the Phacopid suborder Phacopina, whose eyes are schizochrole, the Proetids have the more common holochrole eyes. These eyes are characterized by close packing of biconvex lenses beneath a single corneal layer that covers all of the lenses. Each lens is generally hexagonal in outline and in direct contact with the others. They range in number from 1 to more than 15,000 per eye. Eyes are usually large, and because the individual lenses are hard to make out, they look smooth and sometimes bead-like. The origin of the order Phacopida is uncertain. It comprises 3 suborders which share a distinctive protaspis with 3 pairs of spines on its body. The development of schizochrole eyes in Phacopid trilobites is an example of post-displacement pedimorphosis. The eyes of immature holochrole Cambrian trilobites were basically miniature schizochrole eyes. In Phacopida, these were retained, via delayed growth of these immature structures, into the adult form. Trilobites evolved into many ecological niches, some moved over the seabed as predators, scavengers, or filter feeders, and some swam, feeding on plankton. Some even crawled onto land. Most lifestyles expected of modern marine arthropods are seen in trilobites, with the possible exception of parasitism. Trilobites saw great diversification over time. For such a long-lasting group of animals, it is no surprise that trilobite evolutionary history is marked by a number of extinction events where some groups perished and surviving groups diversified to fill ecological niches with comparable or unique adaptations. Generally, trilobites maintained high diversity levels throughout the Cambrian and Ordovician periods before entering a drawn-out decline in the Devonian, culminating in the final extinction of the last few survivors at the end of the Permian period. Urbenicyle is a trilobite with very large eyes, with 33 to 36 vertical rows of 13 to 19 lenses each. The lower edge of eye slightly overhangs the adjacent part of the free cheek. The eyebrow-like palpebral lobe extends laterally over the visual surface of the eyes, shading the eye against the sun. The visual surface is a vertical half-cylinder, with 18 or 19 lenses per vertical row. Front of the head shield sticking out to the front and ornate with a row of upward and very short spines. The function of the Wallaceurop's elaborate tridents is still poorly understood. But an unusual individual of the long trident species Wallaceurops trifurcatus has been found with a lopsided 4-pronged trident, and since it was able to grow to full maturity, the shape of the structure probably wasn't absolutely vital for survival, suggesting it wasn't used for feeding or sensory purposes. The tridents may instead have been used for combat with each other, similar to the horns of some modern beetles. However, these sorts of features are usually only seen in males, and there's currently no definite evidence for any significant sexual dimorphism in trilobites. The cephalon of Huntonia tonia has a broad, flat frontal margin, with an extension to the front, a bit like a dolphin. The frontal lobe of the moderately convex glabella is much wider and longer than the other 3 pairs of lobes, and the occipital ring, all of which are defined by distinct glabellar furrows, that except for the occipital furrow, do not cross the midline. The eyes are large half-circles that originate from immediately posterior of the frontal lobe and end parallel to the front of the occipital ring. Perhaps one of the oddest trilobite was the genus Odontocephalus, known mainly from the early to mid-Devonian. It wasn't overall very elaborately ornamented. The front margin of its head had a row of extensions that flared out to meet at their tips, forming something resembling the cowcatchers used on trains. The actual function of this structure is unknown. It might have been purely used for visual display since trilobites had excellent vision, but it was also a fast-moving bottom dweller, and its cowcatcher may have served the same sort of purpose as its modern equivalent, deflecting small obstacles in its path as it trundled along the seabed. There are specimens known of Phacops rana with many irregular black spots. Because similar spots in a specimen of Greenops booty from the same site are arranged in rows, it may be assumed that they are original and not caused by the fossilization process. The spots are irregular and have spurs branching outwardly, similar to the melanophores in many extant animals. In one specimen, the black spots are much larger than in another one. It is quite conceivable that changing the size of the melanophores enabled Phacops rana to camouflage itself in different environments. Arctonurus reached about 8 inches in length, though the normal adult carapace was about 4 inches. It lived in moderately deep water in semi-tropical regions. Before the late 1990s, complete Arctonurus fossils were very rare. The vast majority of complete specimens were commercially mined near Middleport, New York, and the trilobite is now relatively common in museum, university, and private collections. Lichida is an order of typically spiny trilobite that lived from the Furongian to the Devonian period. Their exoskeletons often have a grainy texture or have wart or spine-like tubercles. Some species are extraordinarily spiny, having spiny thoracic segments that are as long or longer than the entire body, from cephalon to pygidium. No whole Pterotaspis specimens have been found, only disarticulated fragments of its exoskeleton, but enough fragments have been found to allow researchers to form reconstructions of the whole animal. Like other trilobites, it was presumed to have been a detritivore that was also an opportunistic predator, preying on small burrowing animals, such as mollusks, worms or arthropods. Trilobites have been important in estimating the rate of speciation during the period known as the Cambrian explosion because they are the most diverse group of metazoans known from the fossil record of the early Cambrian. Trilobites were still active participants in the Ordovician radiation event, with a new fauna taking over from the old Cambrian one. Many, if not almost all odontopleurids have long spines that are derived either from the margins of the exoskeleton, or from granular or tubercular ornamentation, or both. Many odontopleurids are so spinose so as to be described as having spines on spines. These trilobites show long pleural spines and were a low-level epifaunal detritivore. Dicronurus is speculated that such tremendous spines hampered the ability of predators, such as Arthrodire or placoderms, to attack them, as well as to help prevent them from sinking into the soft mud of their environment. They are distinguished from other odontopleurids by the pair of large, curled, horn-like spines that emanate from behind the glabellum. The genus name refers to these distinctive horns, in fact. The rounded smooth shape of Bumastis, as well as the almost complete effacement of its cephalon, is believed to have been an adaptation for burrowing. The presence of well-developed eyes also suggests that it may have kept them above the substrate by burrowing into sediments backward. They are situated in such a way that they provide the trilobite with a semicircular field of vision on each side, keeping them aware of movements near them. Olenoides is an average-sized trilobite, broadly oval in outline. Its cephalon is semicircular. The glabella is parallel-sided, rounded at its front and almost reaches the anterior border. Narrow ocular ridges curve backwards from the front of the glabella to the small, outwardly bowed eyes. The labrygini narrow backward into straight, slender genal spines that reach as far as the third thorax segment. Thorax consists of 7 segments that end in needle-like spines.